I had a lot of hope for Saints Row. I was a huge fan of the original series and absolutely loved all of them, except Agents of Mayhem, to the point where I played through each of them at least 3 times. I remember all the fun times I had with friends and co-op just running around and doing dumb stuff in the cities. I remember being dressed up as a hot dog and beating down drug dealers with a dildo bat. These are all fond memories that really stand out to me when I think about Saints Row. So when I was given a chance to play and review the latest game in the series, I was excited. I thought, oh man, a fun game where I get to do dumb shit, disconnect from the sensitive world we live in, and just beat people up with random and funny foreign objects. This should be great. Man, was I wrong. Saints Row, at its core, is not a Saints Row game. It's like a cheap imitation of what someone who has never played a Saints Row game thought a Saints Row game is. If this game would have come out in another country like China, not in English, called Thug Gang or something like that, then it'd be right on the money in terms of quality. I cannot stress enough that this isn't Saints Row. Almost everything that made Saints Row fun and enjoyable has been stripped down and removed, and all that's left are the game's glaring flaws. The original games weren't perfect. They were janky outliers that had a semi-serious story that got you invested into it because it tied perfectly into the craziness that was happening at any point. You had memorable characters like Julius and Johnny Gat, especially Johnny Gat, characters you grew attached to who had meaningful arcs as people throughout the games and weren't just agendas ham-fisted in to be woke in corporate terms. I guess at this point, this is going to be less of a review and more of a curb stomp of everything that's wrong with this reboot, because man, there are a lot of things wrong. So hold on for the ride because it's going to get really aggressive. Starting from a technical standpoint, and because people asked in previous reviews, I played this game entirely through on a 3090 FTW3 with an AMD Ryzen 9 5950X, with everything cranked up to literal maximum, including the ray tracing, if you can even call it that, really giving the game the chance to shine if it was able to. I ran this at 1440p for the sake of filming, and this averaged me anywhere from 85 FPS on the low end to 140 FPS on the high. A lot of the time in major fights or when the lighting decided to vomit all over my screen, I'd drop down to the low, but overall it was pretty stable. This is great, and you'd expect this considering the game kind of looks like ass for anything that's come out in the last 10 years, but we'll get to that. As far as functioning as a game, Saints Row barely does. It's a complete technical nightmare with an unbelievable amount of bugs that I started to encounter from the very first 10 minutes I played. This never got better as I continued to play through the game. The first example I can mention is the fact that I failed the tutorial on driving multiple times and soft locked once or twice because I killed a cop car with a gun rather than the intended method of ramming them. This stopped all the other cops from spawning in the tutorial until I rebooted the game entirely. Or I could just shoot him game. I don't need to really learn how to sideswipe. I have a gun. It's like won't let me progress without sideswiping the cops, but I already killed them. I'm so confused, dude. Just destroy the cop cars. There's no cop cars! I broke the game again. I just want to say I've broken it again, Maxie. I can't beat the tutorial, dude. I'm like that Cuphead guy. It's so broken. I just restarted. There were times when enemies didn't spawn themselves, or I fell through the floor, or my gun stopped working. The world didn't load, mission checkpoints didn't trigger, audio broke, my game crashed, I got frozen midair, I couldn't open doors to go to objectives, I couldn't use vehicles, my money completely vanished to zero, my money completely launched to millions for no reason, and other times when I was permanently wanted no matter what I did. And these are just a few of the bugs I encountered, but you get the point. This is just as far as gameplay is concerned. If I were to talk about graphical glitches and problems with the visuals, this list would double, but I really don't think I need to, as I could just say that it's freaking broken. Being even more blunt, I could say that I almost stopped entirely reviewing this game 4 times while playing, just because it was so infuriatingly not working that I just couldn't deal with it. I have a lot of things I need to work on, and this was just such an utter and total waste of time just because of the bugs, not including the rest of the game being the garbage dumpster fire that it is. Don't even get me started on trying to play multiplayer, which just didn't work. We tried for hours to be able to connect and play together, but suffered an unbelievable amount of issues, including, get this, my save file being completely overridden by Maxie's and my character being permanently replaced by his character. Yes, you heard that right. My character was deleted and replaced by the character he made, which I have never heard of in any other game or even thought it was possible to happen in any way, shape, or form. Am I online on Epic now?
Yes, you are.
Found a really great bug.
What's your bug?
I'm your character now.
My character?
I'm your character now.
What do you mean?
I'm literally your character now. Let me show you.
This game is fucking broken. Hang on. Why are you my dude? By the way, what do you think?
Pretty good, but also, how does that even, how am I you?
Wait, does that mean that it's overwritten your character?
It overwrit my save and my character. Now, I mentioned sound, and I feel like this needs to be expanded on. The game's sound functions in 2 and only 2 ways. It's either completely and totally broken and cutting out for no reason, or it's completely flat and lifeless at the worst times. There were more times than I can count when I was in a giant battle and my gun sounded like crap, with all this action happening, exploding cars driving everywhere, grenades going off, and there was just no music. It's so lifeless when it does work that you still think it's gonna be bugged or has to be bugged. And honestly, I just don't know if it was at this point.
How does it feel getting stolen from?
Audio can cut out, like I said, at any point. This goes from dialogue to gun sounds, like I said, to engines, people talking. Anything is able to drop in and out seemingly whenever it feels like it. There's no rhyme or reason to any of the audio issues that I encountered. And I even tried multiple headsets and various different audio programs and drivers to make sure it wasn't on my end. And I can confirm it definitely wasn't. Even if everything audio-wise worked flawlessly in 2022, this would still be a big letdown. I think the audio is even worse than the original Saints Row game managed to be on a console Xbox. And we've gone so much further in technology these days, it just astounds me it's this bad.
Okay, remember your marshal training.
And now he will represent me in court of law.
What? What are you saying? Hello? Why is my game sound stopped? What the fuck? What is going on? What's happening? Why can't I hear anything? Oh, okay. It's back now.
This game needed so much more time in the oven. My heart goes out to the quality assurance guys and the developers if they were rushed through to get this out, because most of these things shouldn't have ever made it to launch. My thought process is that this wasn't something they could hold back any longer, that just had to be released, and is with one of the, without a, I was a little angry there, but my thought process is that this wasn't something that they could hold back any longer, that just had to be released. And it is without a doubt one of the most buggy games I have ever played in my life. I struggle to think of a game that was more buggy than this just on its own. A title right now eludes me. It was just that bad. Don't get me wrong, they didn't absolutely overpromise and underdeliver in any sense of the word. They were completely transparent from the start with Saints Row. The trailer we saw is what we got. I guess I just hoped that it wouldn't be even worse than possibly imagined when the real thing came out swinging and I got to try it. Combat is a complete and utter joke. There is no worse third-person combat system I have ever played in my entire life. The closest that I can compare this to is the original launch of the game All Points Bulletin, or APB. That's right, for those of you who have played APB, this is worse. Imagine a third-person combat system where the recoil is so insane that you can't compensate with a mouse and keyboard. Your base default accuracy is like 40%, and enemies are bullet sponges. There's no cover system or intuitive controls. It's just point and shoot down hallways and spray down enemies and hope they die. There's nothing special about it other than the fact that they took something the last 4 games did very well and somehow made it worse than the first game in the series. The decision to make enemies have fat health bars on top of all these other negatives is just mind-blowingly bad. It doesn't feel good. You can't make it feel good. There's 20 weapons or so in the game and they all feel the same. The way they try to compensate for the system being awful is with the single strongest aim assist I've ever felt in a video game. And even with mouse and keyboard giving you or trying to give you headshots when you right click, it's just so over the top and bad. There's also really weird hit registration in combat a lot of the time tied to enemy animations. When they're doing stuff like rolling or taunting or trying to attack you or things along those lines, they seem to have complete hit invulnerability. That's nothing major. It's just something that added more frustration onto something I was already pissed off about. And let me just say, this review is awful for my blood pressure. Skills exist in Saints Row, about 20 levels worth of unlocks for them, ranging from grenades to mines to calling in backup and even a huge revolver that essentially one-shots everyone. They're all pretty simple and nothing to write home about. There's no real insanity to them like you'd come to expect with a Saints Row game, and a lot of them in my playthrough were bugged as well, like the grenade. I couldn't throw it at all. Go figure. Just to clarify, skills would trigger is what I meant by bugged, but the cooldown wouldn't work at all, leading me to just think that they didn't work and just not use them most of the time. The skills themselves also had horrible hit registration. There were more than a handful of times when I'd try to use an ability and it would actually work, and then it would land in a group of enemies and just not do shit to any of them. Although allegedly this has been fixed in the recent patches of the game that I haven't personally played. Look, it's all bad. All the combat's bad. That's what I wanted to tell you. It's all bad. All the combat, all the fighting, it all feels bad. But God, is it not even close to how bad the story is. So let's talk about that. Your character starts off as a black ops goon working for an evil paramilitary corporation that exists in the United States. Clearly, this is a parody of something like Blackwater, where you're doing Black Book missions and fighting terrorists or destroying cartels. I don't know, the game never really explains it. You constantly bicker and have a back and forth with your commanding officer in all these missions, with the exact same beats of comedy being thrown at you nonstop. I put comedy in air quotes because during that, none of it is funny, and pretty much all the dialogue and zany things you do just feel soulless. Sure, there's some crazy action scenes for this part of the story, but they feel so awkward. It's hard to put my thumb on it, but they weren't good and they felt like a total disconnect from everywhere else. Your commanding officer doesn't even seem to exist outside of these small missions, and after you get fired, they have no real world impact, leading this entire ordeal in this day job scenario to have zero effect on anything that happens in the rest of the game. It's pointless. It's so pointless, in fact, that whole arc just kind of ends with you getting fired with no explanation, rhyme, or reason why. It just vanishes completely, which is so stupid. and suddenly the game revolves around your dumbass roommates and you getting in trouble with various gangs and criminal elements in the city to form your own gang. I want to take a moment to say straight out that all of the characters and roommates in the main story are the cringiest pieces of shit that I've ever seen so half-assedly written into a video game. These people are the exact same type of people that the original Saints Row characters and the Saints would have bullied the ever-loving crap out of. They're like super hipsters that preach love and understanding, but also stab and murder and extort people in the same sentence. A great example is that there's a comment about how it's not okay to make fun of people's appearances, which isn't done in irony, but then 5 seconds later, they straight up and murder. It's such a stupid message, and I have no idea where we went wrong as humanity to hold murder to a lesser degree of bad than accidentally insulting someone's appearance. It's insane.
I don't have insurance.
I don't really care. You would if you saw what they charge to fix a flesh wound.
Kev, where's the...
Hall closet,
Yo,
top
Kev.
shelf. Okay, this is gonna suck, buddy.
Oh,
You're doing great.
You're being very brave.
you.
Hey, keep talking to Kev like that and you won't get a star on the star chart.
Ow! Oh, what are we gonna do?
Finish sewing you up?
Yeah, and then what?
So what's next?
What's next is you go back to Stillwater.
What? No, this is my fight too.
Girl, you don't get messy. Let us take care of business.
F you, I'm doing this for Johnny.
All right, well, if we're gonna bring in the boys, we're gonna need a new place.
You're worried about real estate? We have guns. Let's use them.
That bitch got fucking clocked, bro.
The story can be summarized as you fighting the gang's kingpins, rebuilding the Saints, and figuring out who betrayed you in the end in the opening cutscene after a long roundabout and boring journey that you have to go on with absolutely no memorable bad guys or head honchos that you kill along the way. I wouldn't say that it's the worst storyline I've ever played in a game like this, looking at you, Crackdown 3, but God, does it really come close, and it's clear whoever wrote it didn't understand what made the previous games good in the slightest. It doesn't captivate you at all. There's no memorable main characters, like I said earlier, and you never really connect with anyone involved. The roommates themselves sometimes have interesting things to say during combat and missions, but they're usually drowned out by the game's horrible audio by gunfire and explosions. It's just not good. Santo Alesso, the place where this all takes place, is a dead city. It is probably the worst open world we've seen in the last 15 years, and it genuinely feels like they learned nothing from any other open world game. It's like they took everything that makes an open world fun, like people, random encounters, etc., and just threw them out the window, and there's just nothing interesting left. Seriously, you walk around these huge urban metropolises and there's nothing. Hardly any people. All the cars are parked on the side of the road. There's no random events of hilarity like in previous Saints Row games, just nothing. With the game looking as garbage as it does and everything looking last gen, you'd think that they'd compensate by adding a ton of clutter and more people, but no, they didn't. It's empty, it's soulless, it's lifeless, it's corporate feeling. These are the words I'd use to describe what's going on in the areas of the map and what the different places feel like. Sure, they're slightly different visually in the sense of one being a desert, for example, and the city being a city, but outside of that, they feel like wastelands just to get you from point A to point B and to slightly vary up the location. It's just all so depressing to walk around in. There's a distinct lack of anything to stumble across, no sense of exploration, nada. It's just all bland and tasteless, and genuinely made me rush through the storyline because I seriously felt like I had nothing better to do, and any amount of time that I wasn't in the open world made the game feel slightly better. There's side hustles, aka the activities from previous games, but I found these to be grossly unrewarding for payment to reward because, for example, the final car upgrade is $100,000, while side hustles award anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000. They just don't feel good. Sure, they're used to unlock perks and stuff, but it just never felt like it was worthwhile to put my time and effort into these activities. Overall, I'd say the best description of Saints Row is disaster, especially when you look at how much content and how many ideas they had to work with from previous games. It's an experience that actually has the potential to sour the joy and fun you've had with said previous titles, and I wholeheartedly wish that I hadn't forced myself to play through this for your amusement and enjoyment. It is not a good game, and before I give my final verdict, we're gonna break down the scores individually. Gameplay gets a 4 out of 10. It's janky, uninspired, broken as hell, and doesn't feel good. It's not the worst I've ever experienced, but God, is it close. Story also gets a 4 out of 10. I don't know what the hell is going on half the time, and there's nothing memorable from any of it. Nothing. The characters are also so cringe. Graphics get a 5 out of 10. They're average if you were playing on an Xbox 360. That being said, they still have ray tracing, so I have to give it a 5. Audio gets a 3 out of 10. It exists. That's pretty much the best thing I can say. Any lower score would mean that it just doesn't exist at all. It's broken a lot, but yeah, it was there at least. And finally, value gets a 4 out of 10. It's just not worth it. I'd not say it's highway robbery, which is why it's not lower than a 4, but God, do I pity anyone who spent money on this game. That's going to bring my personal final score for the Saints Row remake to a 4 out of 10. With the possibility of maybe going to a 5 out of 10 if they fix the trillions of bugs that exist in the game. It's a bland, janky, broken, and honestly just flat out depressing game that smears crap all over the lineage of the Saints. I wish it hadn't been made. I don't suggest you buy it. And in fact, I suggest you forget it exists, kind of like we all did with Dragon Age 2. Anyway, that's going to be it for this review. If you liked the video, hit that freaking like button and share this review around. And let me know down in the comments what games you'd like me to cover in the immediate or near future. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, this is Delrith, and I'll be seeing you. Bye.